Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our April 22nd Portsmouth Town Council meeting. Before we begin, I just want to go through our emergency evacuation plan. In the event of an emergency, there's two doors to the left of council chambers, as well as a door up at the front of council chambers. We would exit the building, cross Middle Road to the school administration building and await further instruction. If we now could stand for our Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Okay, just a little more housekeeping. We are live streaming tonight. Those of you that are participating remotely, there's an icon to raise your hand, and you'll be called upon. Also, if you're calling in, it's *6 to mute and unmute your phone, and *9 will indicate that you have a question. Indicate to us that you have a question to be called upon. If you're participating remotely or in person, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And with that, we will begin with our roll call.
Mr. Katzman?
Here.
Mr. Gleason?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Levesque?
Yeah.
Mr. Aguilar?
Here. Thank you all. President's executive summary. We did not have a executive session, so there's nothing to update on that front. I would like to thank the emergency service personnel getting the power back on. There was an accident earlier, took out a pole. Nobody was injured, from what I understand, just the pole. So we're back up and running, and with that, we will begin with our consent agenda.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners.
Mr. President, I move that the peddler's license for mobile food establishment be approved as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
That was the other thing he's supposed to do.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Second. We're not waiting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we have minutes from our March 25th meeting.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the minutes of the March 25th and the April 8th. Regular and executive.
There were no exec.
Executive will be on the next agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, as printed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we will be moving on to the Town Administrator's Report. Mr. Rayner.
Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. The school department healthcare premium costs were received after the administrator's proposed budget was submitted to you. Unfortunately, the premiums rose 3.71% vice an expected 2% increase, which they had budgeted for. This represents an increase of $58,000 over what they projected and is laid out in a memo in tonight's correspondence. You will discuss the proposed school budget tomorrow evening, so there's no action required tonight. In my budget brief tonight, I included a levy versus tax rate comparison table that shows various increases to the budget and resulting revised levy and tax rates. With respect to the curbside collection RFP, we received 4 responses. 2 companies have been invited in and have come in to discuss their bids. We are now evaluating the bids and information received, and we will be prepared to make a recommendation to the council at the May 13th council meeting. It's important to note that if the council elects to award a curbside collection contract, the Headley Street Transfer Station will continue to operate as a separate enterprise fund. They will be two completely distinct enterprise funds. Information regarding our current trash tipping and recycling rates is included in the monthly RIREC report in tonight's correspondence. Currently, we've tipped 17.8% of our fiscal year cap, and we have a recycling rate of 34.2%. With respect to the Turnpike Avenue Playground, all playground equipment has been installed, including picnic tables and benches. The stone base has been installed and a pour-in-place rubber surface will be installed this week. This will take about 7 to 10 days to complete, and the wearing surface needs about 72 hours to cure. I skipped, I'll come to the town website. It just got pointed out that I skipped one. But it needs about 72 hours to cure. In the weeks to follow, the playground will be loamed, seeded, and an ornamental fence will be installed. 4 trees will be planted, a brick walkway will be installed, and parking areas will be fine graded. Now to the town website redesign. We've started that process of upgrading and redesigning the town website. A kickoff meeting was held with our web host last week, and a plan of action and milestones was approved. We expect the process to take about 8 months. We've been working with the Navy and the Naval Station to explore mutually beneficial agreements to reduce the costs of shared challenges through intergovernmental support agreements. One area the Navy is looking to explore is paving and sidewalk repair. This would allow the Navy to save money by piggybacking on the town's paving contracts, and the town would receive revenue for allowing them to do so. I'll update the council as we learn more information. I'm sure most of us are aware now that Middletown recently considered asking RIDOT to include a road diet as part of their East Main Road paving project. A public hearing was held last week to discuss the proposal, and ultimately the Middletown Town Council voted not to proceed with the proposal to RIDOT. The East Main Road paving project is expected to begin in Middletown later this year, followed at some point by the Portsmouth portion of the project. I will meet with the director of RIDOT next week to discuss the status of and next steps for the Portsmouth East Main Road project. And then lastly, just a note that the town's Park and Recreation Department will be holding a job fair at the high school this Thursday, April 25th, for students interested in working for the town this summer. Students will learn about various positions that are available during their morning advisory period, and that will be followed by an opportunity to complete an application and speak with the director and the assistant director of recreation during their lunch period. The town is currently looking for lifeguards, camp counselors, and gate attendants. Anyone interested in working this summer for the town can contact the HR director or the rec director directly. More information is available on our website. And Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if I may just ask a question about the, or just add to the RIDOT conversation. I did speak at the Middletown meeting as well as Daniela on that evening. And one of the things that I heard that we've spoke about here is the fact that East Main Road needs to be wider. And everybody has said, well, we can't talk, RIDOT doesn't want to do anything. We're kind of stuck here. And I know, as Mr. Katzman said recently, RIDOT works for us. They work for the citizens of the state of Rhode Island. And I think we should be telling them, or in this case, begging them for any kind of action to widen East Main Road. And I just would ask if you would have that discussion with Director Alviti. And I would further say that I would be ready to promote a resolution of such effect together with the town of Middletown and let it fly and see what happens. We've got nothing to lose.
Point of order. Mr. Gleason, if you want to put that on as a request, that's fine. I object to you indicating anything to the Department of Transportation other than what this council voted, which was that we approve of the road diet.
Take that as you like, Mr. Rayner. Thank you.
Aye. All right, let's move on to our resignations and appointments.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I move that we appoint Ms. Medeiros to the Aquidneck Island Planning Commission, Ms. Riley to the Bristol Ferry Town Common Committee, and Ms. Rossi to the Prudence Island Planning Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Capson. Okay, old business. First item is our monthly finance report. Ms. Marsden?
Good evening, Mr. President and Honorable Council. As of the end of March, the town was 9 months or 75% through fiscal year 24. Year-to-date general revenues were at 77.9% of the total budget. Primary sources are town clerk receipts, interest income, tax receipts, and mooring fee revenue. Year-to-date general fund expenditures were at 72.9% of total budget. Primary drivers were quarterly pension contributions and benefits. While discretionary spending is still frozen, we are tracking favorably through fiscal year end. We will continue to monitor revenues and expenditures closely over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, under old business, it's a request to amend resolution 2024-0408A, a resolution endorsing the 2023 Ride Island Bike Plan as a guiding document in the planning of transportation-related infrastructure for Portsmouth. I had recused myself on this, and I will continue to recuse myself on this. So, Mr. Katzman, if you could take over.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And
Mr.
Mr. Gleason.
President, point of order. Is there anything, this is in fact essentially what we voted on with the full council not 2 weeks ago. Is that correct, Mr. Gleason?
We voted 2 weeks ago on a resolution. That's correct. And
On all of these resolutions, in fact.
the items that I've suggested be added weren't included in the original resolution. So
Which item is it that you are suggesting we did not deal with before?
I believe it's paragraph 5.
of the resolution.
Of the resolution.
So let's see. one,
And,
two,
and
three, four.
basically, go ahead, if you want to pull it up.
Well, Mr. Gleason, this is your agenda item, if you could.
Yep.
And
So,
I have a point of order. That we are in fact doing something again, and he was not on the prevailing side, and we are doing so with 2 members not here. He did not know that, I'm sure, when he put it on the agenda, but nonetheless, it is not for reconsideration tonight. It should not be.
Mr. Vice President, my actual letter to the clerk says, add all as a council member that voted in the affirmative to approve a resolution endorsing the 2023 Rhode Island Bike Plan. I am bringing this back. I did vote in the affirmative, Counselor,
For the bike. on
Yes,
the
I did.
bike resolution.
for the resolution, correct. So you stand corrected, sir. So basically, all I was doing was trying to add some additional studies that have been made in the past to strengthen that resolution. I am in support of the Rhode Island resolution, and I'm asking for an addendum, if that would be the proper method, to add the Rhode Island Strategically Targeted Affordable Roof Road Solution from 2011, the AIPC Strategic Plan from 2016, the Road Safety Assessment for East Main Road 2020, Road Safety Assessment West Main Road 2021. And then those were in the RIDE report, but they're not in our resolution. What I would like to add is Quinnic Island Planning Commission, a Quinnic Island Bikeway, to Portsmouth Town Council presentation from August 25, 2015. So there are 4 different items just that I feel strengthen the original resolution. I realize it's already upstate, and I'm just asking that we approve it as an addendum to the resolution.
Question, comment? Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Levesque?
No, my only comment would have been, it would have been helpful for that to be as part of the agenda item, so we knew what you're looking to add, that's all.
We wanted to make, we didn't have specifically, besides what Mr. Gleason said, but with the list, we didn't know if there was going to be anything else. So we didn't want to list them all in case he had other things that he wanted to list. As to what specifically he wanted the,
That was more directed at Mr. Gleason to have that on the list, so we
Um,
could read
I
it.
just want to,
Like a red lined copy. That's all.
My email, which was dated or labeled an agenda request, should have been included as a
Yeah.
backup, so.
Yep.
I apologize for whatever reason I didn't get in there.
More information to Mary. I mean, I'd have no problem with adding these on there.
So I would make a motion that we add these 5 documents. If anybody wants to second it.
If I may ask a
Yes, sir.
question to
And I'll second that and go.
just to, sure, thank you. The motion is made and seconded. You're suggesting that the items that we've identified here and
Yeah, this is,
so that whereas clause says, whereas the plan is based on recommendations in existing studies, including, and it lists a bunch of studies and plans.
Right.
You're suggesting we would add to it.
I've included 5 plans, 4 of which are in the RIDE document, but not spelled out in the resolution.
But it doesn't, but you would make no other changes to the,
That's correct.
therefore be it resolved, for example.
Right.
Portion.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lewis,
Pro Tem.
thank you.
So we are amending a resolution that was put on by a member who is not here with not the full majority that was available last time to include items that I haven't looked over because your stated position right from the outset was that you preferred the 4 lanes. You didn't want us to get into the road diet. In fact, you testified or commented fairly strongly. If we're going to do this, then let's do it right. The problem is that we don't have anything to go against what the RIDOT is saying. I suggest that we actually put in, and I'm going to make this an motion, that we actually request that we go out for a request for proposal for a traffic engineer to take a look at all of this information and see whether or not the road diet, which this council supported, can in fact be justified under the conditions that exist with the information that we already have. Okay. I'm not asking them to do a new study. I'm just saying, because RIDOT has a directive to do roads that pass the federal standard. And the engineers there uphold that. And they have numbers which indicate that they should not do other roadways. I watched, God save me, the Middletown meeting, and they were very sincere. They worked very hard. But the one thing they kept bumping into was that RIDOT was not for it. Okay. And by the way, let me just tell you something. I drive East Main Road all the time. Middletown's East Main Road is fine. Middletown's West Main Road is a disaster. Why they need to pave East Main Road in Middletown, I have no idea. I'm sure Middletown will be happy to know I said that. But in any event, I would make a motion to amend your motion. And I believe that I can state with a certain amount of belief that Ms. Abbott would agree with me that the town of Portsmouth put out a request for proposal to hire somebody to do a study along the lines of the position this council has taken for a 3-lane road from the Middletown line at least to the bottom of the hill here. To I think we used to call it Cozy Corner.
Bottom of it.
Could I just,
Mr. Yes, Mr.
I
Gaffney.
think a request for proposal is kind of outside the parameters of the agenda, and I think it'd be preferable to put that on the next agenda as a specific agenda.
Oh,
item.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gavin, Mr. Solicitor. What,
I don't see any well, you are the counselor for the town.
indeed,
However, Mr. Gavin, I will suggest to you that we are talking about a string of resolutions having to do with the road. And I would ask you to at least think again as to whether or not actually trying to get information on a string of resolutions might be a wise course for this town to do.
It might be, but I'm just saying, I've seen Open Meetings Act complaints in the past. This is a request for proposals that's gonna cost these.
If I may, if I may, excuse me,
You
if I
are
may,
enjoying this.
I take to the counsel of the town solicitor and
One meeting.
the agenda item as posted as a request to amend this resolution. I think amending it to do something other than, you know,
Mr. Gordon, you
what it
love
resolved
doing
to
that
do.
to
Excuse
me.
me,
Bill.
excuse me.
Point of order.
What I
Please.
would ask, I cannot make a motion as I'm the presiding officer. I'm not necessarily opposed to adding informational items to that whereas clause. But coming into this meeting, it wasn't clear from the agenda item exactly what your amendment proposal would be. I'd be more comfortable if this were perhaps I would look for a motion to table it to our next meeting or next regular meeting, not one of the budget meetings. So that we can know going into it what it is, the specifics of what you're requesting for the resolution. And have had
May
time
I-
to.
may I
consider
just-
it.
May I just add to the
Sure.
comments that were made before? There is only one resolution that I'm aware of, so there isn't a string of resolutions. There is a string of reports that have started near about 2011 or so, that have all had to do with traffic study and how they affect bicycles and walking, et cetera. And my main goal was just to add reports that were clearly shown in the resolution to add to them. 4 of them you've read about already if you read the ride report. The other one is just an additional that talks about what's supposed to be coming down in the tip, I believe, this year. I'll believe it if I see it, for a bike path that ends up giving people a way to get from Tiverton to Burma Road, care of Melville Campgrounds. And that's the only one that we haven't seen so far. The rest are all already published, but they're not documented in our resolution, so.
Do not reference.
And there are different reports. Some of them talk about the road diets. You'd have to read them all, Mr. Levesque.
Yeah,
But I-
except for one thing, Mr. Gleason, I know you haven't got them all. How far back did you go? Just as far back, did you go to 210? Did you go to 1900, 1950?
I believe there's plan and.
I only use the reports that were in the Ride Island reports, other than one that we did in 2015.
And I believe
They know them,
At
right?
at a
Yes, sir.
minimum,
They
the,
do.
So you're amending Ms. Abbott's thing, which you did not bring up last time at all. You're amending the resolution that Ms. Abbott, Councilwoman Abbott put here 2 weeks ago, and you are continuing to ask for a vote on it, even though she is not present here.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm adding to, if you read the resolution, it names all the studies and it says and more. All I've done is add the more. And I've laid them out.
I don't really
That's
care.
all I'm doing is
And
clarifying.
Mr. Gleason, I want you to know that I'll probably prevailing side everything you do from now on and bring it back in the future. Just to let you know what it feels like.
I think that's an unnecessary comment.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hamilton,
It wasn't a necessary comment.
we already have a report from, RIDOT has already done a study of East Main Road and came back and told us a road diet wouldn't work. We asked 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, for them to do such actually implement a road diet temporarily, because it was quote, just paint before they did the paving.
Mhm.
And they came back and said the traffic counts are too high, it won't work.
twice.
I've already explained
Twice.
what I think is their marching orders. Their marching orders are doing things according to the federal rules. We are never gonna widen that road. You know that, Mr. Hamilton.
I do,
Okay, so what we're doing here is just kind of saying.
and I
we're gonna
know.
Do nothing.
And I know the volume of traffic on East Main Road, specifically from the months of April through November, are way too high to have a road diet. And it will cause more issues than it would solve.
People believe that, but I tell you the truth, I don't.
Okay, I watched it pretty specifically last week out in California, how a road diet destroyed traffic.
If I
Councilman,
may.
we had everybody saying the same thing when we did East Main Road. Everybody telling me the same thing when we did Turnpike Avenue. Okay, so I think if you build it, people will adjust to it. And by the way, the other thing is, we said, oh, nobody's gonna use bikes on, well, it reminds me of when we did handicap access. People would say to me, no handicap people are coming into my store. And I say, yeah, that's because you're not accessible. No right-minded person would go on the East Main Road right now because they're gonna get killed. But if we had a legitimate road for it, it would happen.
If I may summarize, we have a motion to amend the resolution which states that we indicate our endorsement of and commitment to the use of the Ride Island Bike Plan as an advisory resource for guidance in the planning and redevelopment of transportation related to infrastructure improvements in the town of Portsmouth, where consistent with the comprehensive community plan and town ordinances. That's the resolution. There is a motion on the floor to amend one of the whereas clauses to add reference to other existing studies. That's the motion on the floor. I'm calling the yeas and nays. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No, and please, may I be recorded as voting on the prevailing side?
Mr. Levesque, you'll have to vote yay.
No, I don't.
Yes,
I
you do.
didn't ask to be recorded. Don't talk to me about Robert's rules, Mr. Chapman. All right, I want to be recorded as voting
The
on the
vote
prevailing side.
was, excuse me, the vote was 3 in favor, 1 opposed, with Mr. Levesque in opposition.
And I'm asking to be recorded on the prevailing side so I can bring this back up.
Which
When in
counts as
fact
a
the
yay
person
vote.
who did it is here.
And at this point, I am relinquishing my chairmanship to the next agenda item, Mr. Aguirre.
That's great. Thank you for your support on that.
Okay. So we're going to move on to new business. First item is the tree commission update. Annual events. Mr. Wheeler. Friday.
Good evening, folks. Thank you for inviting me to give you an update on the Tree Commission. Start by wishing you a happy Earth Day.
Thank you. You as well.
So the commission has some basic events that we run each year. We again had a successful seedling giveaway. We distributed 350 seedlings to about 120 people. They're pretty modest trees and it's a relatively modest budget for it, but we do get reports back of people who have trees that are 30, 40 feet tall. So a good investment for the time. We did that over 2 Saturdays at the end of March. And this coming Friday, we're going to have Arbor Day at the Portsmouth Middle School at 10 a.m. It's going to be dedicated to military families. Arbor Day is part of our Tree City USA certification. Warren McNeely from the commission's here. And on behalf of the town, each year he submits our Tree City USA application. Outside of meetings, the commission spends a great deal of time working with the administration, working with Brian and DPW and Paul. We just heard reference to the tree planting at the Turnpike Avenue playground. We would meet on site and give advice for species selection location. And we do that throughout the year. I certainly would advocate that our very modest tree planting budget we're falling behind with removal. So slip that in, as we certainly could be doing more to keep up with the number of trees we need to remove each year. Consulting takes many forms. We're struggling with beech leaf disease. We've got many mature trees. So that's something that the commission has looked at. We were very pleased to work with the town to provide evaluations for the Old Mill Lane site prep for the gas pipeline, resulting in about $55,000 for the town, which I think is going to be used towards beech leaf disease removals. And then the matter that I was last before the council for, the issues of the Rhode Island Energy Bill continues. That bill was pulled. All 3 commissions did meet with our local representatives and representatives from Rhode Island Energy. We were hoping that we had a compromise, but they instead chose to reintroduce that bill, which would take away each town's authority of their tree warden to supervise, regulate utility line trimming, as well as replace the permission process that currently exists with a notification process with no way. So Senator Lauren Carson has introduced an alternative bill that would include an arbitration process, and we're hoping to continue to work with our representatives to encourage them to look at something that will provide reliable electricity for all of us, while respecting individual property rights and the role that the community has in overseeing utility line trimming as far as public trees. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the
There you
update.
go, Mr. Wheeler, if I may. Can you explain the role of the tree warden to the general public?
Sure, my apologies. I meant to mention, the tree warden by state law has authority to both issue permits for pruning or removal of trees. No trees can be cut down, or a private property owner couldn't come and say, cut half of a public tree without approval. John Fitzgerald does a wonderful job, works very closely with Brian and Paul when there is a request from a resident to remove a tree that is deemed to be dangerous, or the DPW identifies a tree. John will meet with them, go out, inspect the tree, and provide that additional oversight as stated in state law.
Thank you. In general, the public should be aware that typically the town owns 10 feet to either side of most roadways, which means trees in that area belong to the town, which are not for the general public to cut down without permission. Is that safe? Fair
Absolutely.
statement?
And in terms of that, the town has responsibilities to care and maintain for those trees. And that's where, to be honest, we have over many, many decades lost many of our roadsides in Portsmouth that used to be tree lined are fairly sparse. So we would like to, whether it's on public or private property, begin to stabilize and eventually reverse that trend.
We've lost a lot of trees
Yeah.
on utility land as well. And I spoke to one of our reps to try and get something going to get the utilities to at least replace these 30-foot trees with something low and deciduous, some pollinator perhaps, just to keep the trees going. But
I did have the opportunity to meet with Representative Gah and representatives from Rhode Island Energy. It is true that Rhode Island Energy has taken a more aggressive position. This is land that they do own.
yes,
So they do have the right to it. The good news is they have committed to a program where they're going to encourage what we call non-capable trees not capable of growing up to the power lines, blueberry bushes, alders, plants of those natures to come back in these areas.
Right.
And hopefully they will help. Again, it is concerning that Rhode Island Energy has determined that there is a need for greater clearance, reasonable given that power line feeds all of Quidnick Island, I guess part of Jamestown. But again, it really makes you a little concerned about what is their intentions for the roadside. But the work done by Rhode Island Energy did have all of the proper permits, CRMC permits. Unfortunately, other work done on the railroad right of way, we've since learned, and wasn't done in a professional manner, did not have proper CRMC permits. The land trust learned that and filed some type of a complaint with CRMC. And I believe there's action to be taken related to that railroad right of way, particularly concerning by the Russell Preserve, where the railroad right of way is basically the barrier beach. So in the long run, that railroad right of way potentially is at greater risk because of the nature of the cutting that occurred.
well, my hat's off. Thank you very much for all that you
Thank
and the committee do.
Thanks.
And just 20 people available, right? It's a 20-member group, so I'm sure you get space if anybody else wants to join your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Okay. So we are going to move on to new business. Number 2, it's a request to add a Four Hearts Foundation sign to the Turnpike Playground.
Good evening, everyone. Court Chappelle, father and lawyer, I guess. On my left, my daughter Kateri, who we've met. As you know, the Portsmouth has no zoning officially on town property. So when it came time to put the sign up for the playground, we thought it was a good idea to pitch it to the town When we did, quite frankly, it was a great disappointment and surprise that when it went to the recreational committee, the sign that was proposed that we certainly believe fits the character of this playground, talks about the inclusivity of disabled children, has the four hearts symbolized that started this entire project. We don't wish to make a debate about it. We don't certainly wish to have any contentions on a project that has been so positive across the board. But the sign that was ordered and the sign that was made, you have, I believe, in your package. When the town came, they came with the more traditional town signs. This playground, of course, never had that town sign. A lot of your schools don't have that town signs, other things, but we get the fact that the town may want to build a town and put a label on of the playground. I've watched someone devote the last 2 years of their life to putting together. So we're going to ask for you to vote to put the sign that was proposed by the Four Hearts Foundation that our children will like better. I don't know if our founding fathers will, but our children will. We understand that you can replace that sign, or even, quite frankly, you're not going to probably have that sign built by the opening, now scheduled, I believe, for June 1, which I hope to be a big event that we see you all at. This sign will be ready, would like to put it up. We'll budget in to move it if the town gets around to purchasing their own sign and makes it more traditional with the town of Portsmouth. We'll hold that budget in escrow to move that, and I can work that out with Brian. But at least for the opening, would like this sign prominently placed. The sign that was, and the Parks and Rec Committee tried to give us pay homage. You can see the sign that they did. It's hard for us to explain that, but that looks like we're looking for credit to have that done, not the case. The sign that they're proposing doesn't say donated by anybody. We believe it's donated by the town of Portsmouth and the community, just facilitated by the Four Hearts Foundation. And that other one really makes more of a credit grab. That's not what this is about. This is about a kid walking up, seeing the stick figures, knowing that everybody's equal, seeing one, as you know, is disabled and in a wheelchair, another has glasses, and it is the entire theme of what's happened. I hope you've been down there in the last day or two, because it's rare.
awesome.
It's rare for a project to get better. This is better than you were pitched,
Mr. President,
on time.
I would move not to interrupt. And by the way, you're doing a better job than him. I would move that the sign that is requested by the Four Hearts Commission be the one that be set up, particularly as they're doing it at their own expense.
Second, just for clarity, is the sign going to be, this actual sign itself is going to be wood? Painted? Is it going to be carved? I can't tell by the picture. 'Cause by the picture, it looks like it's going to be.
It's professionally
Canvas.
done, obviously, and it is, I believe it's made of signed board, you know, the designed to last, but it is painted,
It is painted.
not illuminated.
The man who has volunteered to make the sign has also agreed to help us maintain the sign as well. So if there's paint that would chip or something, he has agreed to help me fix that.
No, I just wanted to, just by the picture, it looks like a banner, not a sign.
Yeah, no, it's a
I
sign.
wanted to just
Yeah.
make sure.
It's a relatively expensive
He-
quality sign.
He recently just did the new mini golf sign. I don't know if you've seen it.
Huron Valley.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gleason.
what seemed to be missing from the motion was, and they discussed it here tonight, is they've offered it as a temporary sign till we get a quote unquote Portsmouth sign. I understand you'd like to have it completely, it's done, it's there forever. I personally think you really don't want the kids wandering 10 feet away from the roadbed to look at that sign, and you'd be better off having it inside the park somewhere, whether it's on the fence going into the park, and we just have a standard Portsmouth sign on the outside. Sure, you probably don't want to hear that, Terry, but that's my viewpoint, that we do this as you've asked till we get a formal sign installed.
So is your suggestion to put this, lack of a better term, inside the fence line where the playground is going to be and have the
Yes.
Portsmouth sign out front?
Correct. That's the
Okay.
way I would view doing this.
Couple of things. One, I omitted it because I didn't want it. Two, no, I don't think, it's kind of funny, your brother and Kevin and I were on the council when we got rid of the requirement that the town has to ask anybody about what to put on its property. Now, these folks have dedicated how long?
Almost 2 years to the day we came here and asked you for
Okay.
permission to.
2 years to this project, and they want a particular thing. Done. Done.
Any further discussion? Mr.
Let's vote.
Hamilton, well, I just have a couple comments. Mr. Gasman, did you have anything to add? All right, no, I do want to, say it is tremendous over at the playground. That is a, probably a once in a lifetime opportunity for the town. The cost associated with that is well beyond what I think the town could have done.
I would agree.
It is a top-notch playground, and it wouldn't be there without a lot of the efforts that were done with fundraising. And yes, it is town property, and the town has done some parts to chip in. But the playground of that magnitude would not be here without a lot of hard work and fundraising. I was concerned a little bit about maintenance of the sign, but if somebody's going to be maintaining it.
This is my baby and I promise you I'll take care of it.
Well, I think what I was trying to torn with is, I know we have some standardization of signs and we're trying to go there, but in this situation, there's other opportunities where we don't have the Portsmouth sign standards. It's not an official policy. It's kind of the unwritten rule of, we'd like to have our signs be more in conformance, but we don't have a hard and fast rule that the signs have to be that way. If that's the way we want to go as a council, we can, implement that. But I think in this situation, the sign is there, ready to go. I don't think the town was prepared to put up a new sign. I'm not sure. I don't think we were. So I see nothing wrong with having this sign put up. You could look at it two ways. It doesn't conform, but it's a playground. It's a pretty special playground. And maybe this can be a model for other playgrounds where, in order the town can't be everything for every, opportunity that comes up. So without private participation, without private fundraising, we may not get to do some of these things. So I think this is a very good partnership, and I do support the sign and keeping it there as long as you're going to be maintaining it. So
For the record, our police department doesn't have a conforming sign.
I didn't want to bring that up.
But it was given part of the
Yeah.
building to building.
If I may, I just want
Sure.
to add that when I heard this was coming along, before seeing the sign and before reading your explanation, my inclination was, well, we should have some sort of standardized Portsmouth sign. But I actually like the idea for a playground for children, that there is a nod to nonconformity and welcoming that this sign is.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second to, yes, we have additional discussion.
I just have a question.
Sure.
Is it, well, first off, I made my comments. I see us going in the direction of putting your sign up. And first off, again, thank you for all the work that you did. I wish that the town could raise this kind of money and we could accomplish this all over town, all the playgrounds, but it seems to be something that has to be done by individuals undertaking these efforts. So thank you again. Is this sign, if you're driving by the playground, is it perpendicular to the road and it's a double-sided sign? So, or is it just facing the street?
It is double-sided, and my knowledge is it has to be 10 feet back, so it will be 10 feet back and you can see it from either side.
I think the placements clearly has to be in coordination with Department of Public Works and Brian.
Right.
That's clear.
And they're going to make sure that it conforms to our ordinance as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
For size wise, even though there is no ordinance, it was designed so that if that was a private commercial spot, the size fit our ordinance. So it's not my friend from the zoning boards. Yeah,
So-
all of you really, most of you, but it's the size of it met the criteria of what a standalone sign would be for a single commercial lot. So it's
But what you're telling me
32
is,
square feet.
the-
less than
you're
30.
telling me the sign ordinance doesn't apply to playgrounds.
The sign ordinance doesn't apply to town property,
Okay,
but it's not like we're coming in and saying, hey, because it doesn't apply, we want a 50-foot neon sign with pink, flamingos.
understood.
This would comply without a permit for any commercial lot in town.
Okay.
With a building permit, not a zoning permit.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Ms. Hitchin?
Good evening, everybody. I just do want to add on a few, maybe recommended conditions for the sign. And that there be no lighting associated with the new sign. The sign be at least 10 feet from the front property line. And that a proper building permit be obtained prior to the installation. It won't be our DPW that installs the sign. It will be your sign contractor that installs the sign. So a building permit be officially pulled. We have some sign people in town. I think it's appropriate that a sign permit be pulled.
Gonna have to back you up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. So
Enough said. Yes.
well, let's get the, I think from the testimony, it's 10 feet back.
It
Right.
is.
It'll,
There's no lifting.
and there will be no lighting. And there's no power run to it, so there won't be any
No, it's just
uplighting,
the-
no nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. And if that were the case down the road, you'd have to come back and ask us for permission, but
Yeah.
I think, yeah, no lighting is right there. Okay,
Because the town, I just want to clarify it, Mr. Gleason, that the town is exempt. The property is exempt. If it were in a commercial zone, the owner would have up to 32 square feet to put a sign. Due to this property, it's actually in an R20 zone. I think it's like 12 square feet. It's a very small sized allowance for a sign. Which I think that may be the size of the existing sign, so they are increasing the size significantly. I just wanted to let you know that.
One of the reasons we exempted the town.
all right. So we have a motion. Any further discussion from counselors?
If we just clarify the motion, it'd be helpful.
I'm sorry.
Clarify the
Just
motion.
clarify your motion.
No, the motion is that they put up the sign as they propose.
Thank you.
With the amendment that they make sure they pull the permit.
No,
Well,
They
that's-
need to pull a permit.
They need to pull a permit.
if they need to pull a permit, they'll pull a permit. We're not exempting them from pulling a permit. We're not exempting them from traffic rules. We're not exempting them from.
I will make an amendment to the motion that it has the stipulation of pulling a permit for the sign.
Can we waive pulling a permit?
That is just minor. So that's, I think just to,
It's the request of the town planner.
It is the
request
of the town.
Oh, for crying out loud. All right, Mr. Hamilton, make your
Mr.
amendment.
Levesque, you and I've been very patient with your antics for the past year and a half. I'm making a specific request at the request of the town planner to add it to the motion. That is it. If I can have a second, we can move on.
Would you add the no lights and the 10-foot back?
As the maker of the motion, Mr. Hamilton, I will agree that it can be added. If the seconder agrees, and I think that was Eunice.
I will second that as amended.
Because you probably didn't hear it, I suggested to Mr. Hamilton that we add the no lights and the
They-
10-foot
yeah.
back.
They
as
already said
well.
they're gonna do that,
So
but
I don't know if they heard that
yeah.
as part of the amendment.
Was that part of your amendment, Mr. Hamilton?
Sure.
Why don't we go ahead with that also? Mr.
Thank you.
Hamilton?
And I'll second.
I don't
that
want
again.
to upset you.
all right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, Catering.
5-0. Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Okay.
Now, see.
Okay. So
No, because he just had it.
let's move on to
That's for
new
the
business
purchase.
number 3. It's a request to advertise for a public hearing for sound variance to allow for live amplified music at Ragged Island Brewing Company, 54 Bristol Ferry Road throughout the summer.
So moved.
Would we have, we know what the dates would be?
May 13th,
May 13th?
It's every Wednesday night, but there's a specific,
July, and in
Yeah.
August, it's every Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And then there's the June 9th.
is that the bigger concert?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're looking
But
for-
the public hearing is May 13th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
public hearing for the 13th.
Okay.
And I know Mr. Gray is out of town tonight, but.
So we have a motion and a second.
I'll second it.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Mr. Levesque made the motion to approve the public hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we're going to move on to new business number 4. It's resolutions passed by the Hopkinton Town Council, moved from correspondence last meeting on April 8th. The agenda at the request of Councilman Gleason. So Mr. Gleason, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4,
For
5,
10
7.
minutes, huh?
Well, you got 7 resolutions. Give us your rundown.
Okay, you're gonna like this one. This
A point of order again. Does any of this have specifically to do with the town of Portsmouth? Specifically?
Yes.
These are all state requests, state things. If you want to deal with state issues, run for state legislature. We're not a debating society. Okay, these are all issues that may impact Portsmouth, may not. Okay, but as far as I'm concerned, we haven't heard the hearings on these. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gleason. Keep doing that. I have put up.
You
with your
should-
waste of
You
time.
should go to a
Mr.
Middletown
Hampton
meeting and see
withdrew
how,
his Comments for long enough.
you should
too.
go to a Middletown meeting and see how
Gentlemen.
people are respected.
that?
Gentlemen, let's bring it back to,
This has nothing to do
The only
with
comments I'm gonna
report.
make about this agenda item is that a constituent asked me to take this out of correspondence and put it on the agenda. However, and I have looked at this myself, they decided not to pursue it, okay? The only thing, a constituent.
Oh.
Okay?
Mhm.
So all I would like to say is all of these are fresh and I think what they were under the impression that they were talking about items that were brought forward possibly last year to talk about housing changes to promote affordable housing, which some of these are, but these are all 2024 resolutions. And there was a mistake from that standpoint. But what I would like to suggest is that for some reason, Hopkinton has taken a stance that they are opposing 6 or 7 resolutions that are put forward by our State House. So somebody in Hopkinton is looking out for their own city or town, I guess you'd call it a town, to make their own city or town to stay the same as they are now, if need be, or if they were promoting these resolutions to improve their town based on state activity. I would just ask the question, is anybody here in the town of Portsmouth watching what's going on at the State House as these laws are enacted to promote affordable housing throughout the state and how it affects our town?
Every day.
I see Aaliyah has stepped to the post here. Thank you.
I can talk about each and every one of these bills if you want me to. I know there is,
I don't, because it's not, to me, it's not worth pursuing and my motion will ultimately,
You take the rest of the night. We are a debating society.
okay.
I won't do that if we're not doing, I know we have a big budget presentation tonight, but I can promise you that the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns watches this daily as soon as these bills get posted. Myself, the town administrator, various other department heads watch the bills as they relate to each discipline. I have been watching housing, land use regulations. There's new legislation that tries to fix the 13 bills that got passed last year. It's how many bills that were just issued, like over 400 in the last couple weeks. It's a full-time job just watching these bills. Some of the ones that are on this agenda are being held for further study, which already means that they're going nowhere. Some of the ones like Bill 2024 is for only those that are not in an urban boundary where we have RIPTA right outside, so that's not applicable to us. So,
There were a couple that weren't applicable.
exactly.
So basically what you're telling me is you keep an eye on it, and if one of these bills looks like it's very detrimental to the town of Portsmouth, you'll bring it to our attention.
We do. So not only the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, but our own Rhode Island Planners Association, which I am a member. We watch them diligently. So we advocate one way or the other.
Let me just say editorially, what you think is detrimental, Mr. Gleason, I might not. One of these provisions here doesn't want to deal with low or moderate income if there's no substantial public transportation. Public housing for most of our citizens is a major issue. And the state has been trying to address it. Yes, the Hopkintons and the Barringtons and the Portsmouths and the Burvilles all want to fight. That's because we're not responsible, we're not taking our responsibility for these issues.
So, Mr. President, my motion would be to receive these and place them on file.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason.
You're
Thank
very
you, Mr.
welcome.
Lebec. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you for the second.
Okay, on to new business number 5. This is the presentation and submission for review, the town administrator's proposed budget fiscal year July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. Mr. Rayner.
Thank you. If you could bring up the brief. We'll just wait for a moment while Barbara brings the brief up on the screens. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Thank you, brother. Okay, so good evening again. Before we discuss the projected revenues, which will follow this brief, I'll just provide an overview for the
Excuse me,
proposed
I
budget.
hate to interrupt. That's correct but what's being displayed in the Zoom meeting is not that.
Okay.
What's in Zoom?
It look,
Oh, all right.
Showing that screen right now.
exactly, yeah.
We need more hamsters.
There you go. Thank you.
Good.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So this brief will just be an overview of the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So here's an overview of the remaining budget calendar. Obviously, we scheduled meetings through Thursday night as needed this week. We anticipate the council will adopt a provisional budget on May 13th, if that's not already done at the end of this week. The public budget hearing is scheduled for June 12th, and adoption of the final budget is scheduled for June 24th, at the June 24th Town Council agenda. Next slide, please. So the proposed budget for fiscal year 24-25 submitted for your review and consideration has been prepared in accordance with the applicable sections of the town charter. School and town staff have been working since late summer to provide a budget that will help guide policy and inform residents of the town's fiscal programs and operations. We did our best to base this budget on conservative financial values for both revenues and expenditures. The balanced budget considers available resources, determines their priority, and then develops a spending plan which addresses priorities within the constraints of the resources available. The budget that is proposed for the next fiscal year is balanced and supports a municipal government focused on providing core services aligned with the town's vision and goals. Next slide, please. Some significant drivers behind this budget include a continued drop in school state aid, the elimination of the car tax, and why I include that again is because the reimbursement from the state is not increased. So it's locked at values from 3 years ago. So there's no increase in value in those reimbursements. Our debt service. This will be a full year of the expiration of the Fire Safer Grant, capital improvements and projects, salary adjustments, school bus transportation costs, increased healthcare costs, stubbornly high costs of goods and services, the expiration of the American Rescue Plan and ESSER funds, and as we've discussed before, a difficulty in retention and recruitment of personnel. We address these budget drivers via a number of strategies. We've negotiated longer-term labor contracts. We maintain a contingency fund. We seek grant opportunities. We prioritize capital needs. We promote employee health and safety programs via our partnership with the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust. And we will take on no new debt, and we will continue our mutual aid agreements with surrounding communities. Next slide, please. We will see a decrease in bond debt service this year, followed next year by increases due to the recent school bond. Our debt service represents 3.41% of the proposed budget. Barring new debt, our next significant drops in debt service will be in fiscal year 37 and 39. Next slide, please. Cumulatively, there has been a $2.3 million decrease in state aid, school state aid since fiscal year 11. Next slide, please. With respect to our current tax burden, the median value of a single-family home in Rhode Island in 2024 was $460,000. This chart depicts the median Portsmouth fiscal year 24 tax burden of $5,885 relative to other municipalities and relative to the state median tax burden of $6,645. Next slide, thank you. And compared to the rest of the state, Portsmouth ranks 5th highest of 39 communities with respect to median family income. Next slide, please. And 13th highest compared to the rest of the state with respect to median household income. Next slide, please. Here's a comparison of our fiscal year 24 tax burden relative to the rest of Rhode Island. Our tax rate was 10th lowest relative to the rest of Rhode Island, obviously in the bottom half. Our proposed tax rate of $13.17.4 would place us well into the bottom third of the state. Next slide, please. Relative to cities and towns with like services, that is a professional police department, a fire department, and a K through 12 school district, our proposed tax rate would put us in the bottom quarter of towns and cities offering those full services. Our proposed tax rate would keep us in the bottom quarter. So some budget takeaways. Obviously, the commitment of the staff remains focused on maintaining a high level of service that is expected by our community. Based on revenue projections and recommended revisions to expenses, I propose expenditures of $346,959 from the general fund, which represents a total budget increase of 3.94% over last year and a 39.2 cents property tax increase from $12.78 to $13.17 per $1,000 in assessed value. Our balanced budget serves to provide services to residents they cannot provide for themselves and includes funding to maintain buildings, equipment, and infrastructure. It also provides funding for debt service, pensions, other post-employment benefits, public safety, our school district, and civic support. Of note, proposed civic support this year decreased 17.03% over last year, but funding for the Portsmouth Prevention Coalition will be provided through the opioid settlement money, and the Prudence Island Volunteer Fire Department funding has been placed in its own section under the Portsmouth Fire Department. If the Volunteer Fire Department funding remained in civic support, that line would have increased by 2.63%. Next slide, please. Most of town expenditures are non-discretionary, meaning we are contractually obligated to commit funding, or we are legally obligated to pay off borrowed funds. A little over 2.6% of the total budget represents the discretionary spending by town-side departments compared to the entire budget. So that small wedge is really what we have discretion over. Next slide, please. As you all know, property taxes are the largest source of revenue for the town. For this budget, they account for 85.85%, down from 86.3% last year. Of note, state aid appears to increase from 4.69% last year to 5.09% this year. However, this is due to the anticipated tangible tax credit reimbursement. Next slide, please. Here we can see how Portsmouth compares to state averages in revenue sources. On average, Rhode Island municipalities receive more state and federal education aid than Portsmouth and can afford to draw less required revenue from property taxes. But overall, they're fairly comparable. Next slide, please. Here you can see where revenues will be applied. As in previous years, school and public safety account for about 78% of the total budget. Next slide, please. And with respect to expenditures, Portsmouth is in line with the rest of the state regarding where we focus our spending across 6 broad categories: defined benefit investments, other benefits, compensation, debt service, school appropriations, and general operations. Next slide, please. So in developing the budget, we take into account all previously mentioned methods and drivers, but in the end, we have to consider the impact of the tax rate and what is allowable under law. These are the metrics we factor into consideration of the proposed tax rate. In addition to expenditures and non-tax revenues, we must consider net assessed property values, the tax cap, the levy required to balance revenues and expenditures, and how much tax will actually be collected. Next slide, please. Our tax revenues come from 3 primary sources: the residential real estate property tax, the commercial property tax, and a tangible property tax. The Portsmouth commercial tax base is relatively small compared to the rest of the state. Hence, our reliance on residential property tax revenue is skewed higher than the state average. Additionally, Portsmouth charges the same tax rate for residential and commercial. Our tangible tax rate is frozen at $15.65 per $1,000 in assessed value, and the motor vehicle tax has been eliminated. However, the motor vehicle reimbursement from the state, as I said, is frozen at values established over 3 years ago. Therefore, the only tax rates that can be adjusted to balance the budget are real estate and commercial taxes, property taxes. Next slide, please. So I apologize on this slide. I know it's a bit of an eye chart, but we'll correct the headings. These obviously refer to fiscal year 24 to 25, vice where it says 23 to 24. So when referring to the tax cap, we're referring to the law which limits the allowable revenue growth from local property taxes, that is residential, commercial, and tangible, to 4% year over year. So you can't grow that levy more than 4% year over year. The amount needed in general property taxes, which is referred to as the levy, is $64,172,831, or 3.6647% over last year. This amount is $207,546 below the maximum 4% levy increase. Next slide, please. So for this budget, we're projecting a 97.375% collection rate. We are also accounting for a drop in the percentage of net asset values for tangible property. This year, Raytheon wrote off a larger than normal amount of tangible property. So the levy change for each class, residential increased 4.483%, commercial increased 2.181%, and tangible dropped 13.855%. Next slide, please. So to compute the tax rate, we total the net assessed property value of our residential, commercial, and tangible properties, which is the gross property value minus property exemptions. We divide that by 1,000 and then divide that into the levy required to balance the budget. This results in the tax rate per $1,000 in assessed values. As I said, the tangible tax rate is frozen. For this proposed budget, the residential real estate and commercial tax rate is proposed to be $13.17.4 per thousand, which is a 39.2 cent increase in the property tax over last year. Next slide, please. Shown another way, a little clearer, the residential real estate and commercial tax rates have increased 3.066% over last year, which is less than the current annual inflation rate. Next slide, please. So in my administrator's report, I highlighted the school request to increase the town appropriation by $58,000 to cover the unanticipated increase in healthcare premiums. I've laid out a range of levy options to show you the impact on the tax rate for each case. This will be discussed tomorrow, but the requested increase to the local appropriation for the school department would result in the residential real estate and commercial tax rate. It'll result in it going from the proposed 13.174 to 13.186, or the levy would increase 3.761% over the last year. And you can see that it's still below, obviously, the cap of 4%. Next slide, please. So as stated, taxes are the largest source of revenue for the town and account historically for about 85% of our revenues. Real estate is assessed at 100% value based on periodic evaluations performed by the tax assessor. Our last full revaluation, which is required every 9 years, was conducted in 2016-17. Our latest statistical revaluation went into effect December 31st, 2022. Our next full revaluation will be conducted in 2025-26. Next slide, please. So to juxtapose the tax rate in relation to inflation, the annual U.S. inflation rate as of April 10th is 3.5%. By contrast, the total levy is 3.66% over last year, and the proposed tax rate, as I stated, is 3.06% above last year's rate. Next slide, please. To put the proposed tax rate in perspective relative to cumulative inflation, the growth in value of a median value home over the last 20 years has been 239%. In absolute dollars, the tax on that home has grown 195%. However, the cumulative inflation over the last 20 years has been 65%. So the tax adjusted for inflation over the last 20 years has increased 18% if we use the current tax rate. The growth in value of a median value home over the last 10 years has been 170%. In absolute dollars, the tax on that home has grown 142%. However, the cumulative inflation over the last 10 years has been 31%. So the tax adjusted for inflation over the last 10 years has increased 8% if we use the current tax rate. Next slide, please. Our budget also includes a capital improvement plan, and that process of developing that plan begins in August of each year. Capital needs are reviewed and assessed across all departments, and revisions and updates are made as needed to the long-range capital improvement request plan. From there, the proposed fiscal year capital improvement plan is drafted and then incorporated into the proposed budget. Next slide, please. So here's a recap of our proposed improvement plan, capital improvement plan. Of note, we will address needed town hall office furniture replacements, IT upgrades, equipment and vehicle replacements, building repairs and improvements, life safety equipment, lighting to support shared use of Navy Carpoint facility, and Glen Park playground equipment, and a new ballroom floor for Glen Manor House. These proposed capital improvements total $655,860. And next slide, please. So between the proposed spending for our road pavement plan and state grants, which we're eligible for this year, we project 1.5 million total spending on road work next year. Now, that's not all our money. There is a substantial amount of money that will come from the state. The amount proposed to be spent on the town repaving program is in line with our current road assessment study. We will maintain a satisfactory rating. However, inflation is considerably increasing the price of asphalt and the cost of services. We will continue to monitor and assess our road rating every year, and propose funding is needed to maintain at a minimum safety pavement conditions, satisfactory pavement conditions. So in closing, I'd like to reiterate that the budget is the most important short-term planning tool at our and your disposal. It is a plan wherein we establish service priorities for the community and a method to continue providing those services in a fiscally sustainable way. I deeply appreciate the hard work of a most diligent staff. They are truly committed to excellence in government, and I'm very proud of them all. Lastly, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to the school administration and committee, town committees who dedicate their time and service to our community, and civic leaders for their valuable input and insight. That concludes the budget brief, and I'm prepared to go into a discussion on revenues.
Mr. Rayner, just before we do that, could we just take a quick peek back at page 24, where you had the levy with I just want to make sure that if I was missing something. If you go to page 24, it was the tax rate options fiscal year right there. So that first line, your budget 64,172,831. That's the levy. And then the next line over is just adding 50,000 to that.
Yeah, so each slide,
I think that
to give you bands.
Mr. Rayner?
I wanted to give you bands that you could consider because it's not one for one. A dollar increase in a levy doesn't exactly, it's iterative because you got to go through all the different revenues and the three different tax rates. So I wanted to show you the third one over where it says revised school request. That shows you what the effect on the levy is by adding that $58,000. And then in comparison, I just did it in $50,000 bands, and then it ends. There's always the question, how close are we to the cap, or how far can we go to the cap? Well, going to the cap would result in a levy of $64,380, and a tax rate equivalent to that would be $13.21.8.
Right. So I know that these numbers are might have some impacts down the road, but that first line plus 50K is not, I think that number up there is
No,
wrong.
the levy.
No, I mean.
No, I see what you're saying. the levy doesn't go up $50,000. If you increase the budget by $50,000, that's the resultant levy.
I'm sorry, no, but that 64 number, right? The
Yep.
64, 172, 831. We add 50,000 to that. And we get 64, it should be 222. Right.
I'll take a look at that.
No, just because I think that number is what's gonna
Yeah.
carry through.
I'll make sure, I'll take a look at it and make sure we have this available tomorrow.
I may
when you
have said the
discuss at
wrong,
school.
I may have said the wrong wording, but I think, I just want to have those numbers checked.
I'm tracking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner.
So with respect to the budget, if we could pull up the budget. Is you ready? Good to go. Okay. So if you could go to page 9 of the budget, which is the executive summary. Okay. So based on revenue projections, as I've stated, I proposed expenditures of $74,346,959 from the general fund. And again, that represents a total budget increase of 3.94% over last year. Our anticipated residential real estate and commercial property tax rate is again $13.174 per 1,000 assessed value, which again is about a 39-cent increase or a 3.656% increase in the levy year over year. Highlighted at the top of this page, you can see the budget proposal puts us below the 4% cap. It's at 3.66%. In dollars, again, this means that we are $207,546 below the maximum levy on residential, commercial, and tangible property. So if we go to page 10, here you can see the revenue summary. You can follow the bottom line numbers here or track along with me starting on page 15. So the tax levy details are listed on page 15 and 16. On these pages, you can see how the certification of the 2023 tax roll in each category, the anticipated tax rate per $1,000 in assessed value, and the estimated collection rate are factored in the computation for projected tax revenues. If you go to page 17. So tax revenue, which is highlighted on page 17, you can see that once you subtract out the allowances for uncontrolled, everybody's gonna love that one, uncollectible taxes and add back in the allowances for prorated taxes, payments in lieu of taxes, and prior year collections, we project net property tax revenue to be $63,825,144. Go to page 19. So unfortunately, for fiscal year 25, state aid for schools will again decrease by almost $100,000 this year. In total, state aid will remain relatively flat with a slight increase of $38,000, but this is due mostly to the cannabis local excise tax. Department revenues begin just below on page 19. So for the town clerk, the average annual revenue from real estate transfer fees for the last 10 years has been about $475,000.
No.
We underestimated revenue from this source last fiscal year. In projecting town clerk revenue, we considered the continued cooling of the market and stabilized interest rates. Overall, we project a 26.53% increase in town clerk revenue for a total of $725,000. Next, you'll see finance. We continue to see favorable interest income. Central bank rates are still high to fight inflation, and this is good for deposit rates. We have also consolidated our cash accounts, which has resulted in greater compounding interest. Overall, we project $130,600 in finance revenue for fiscal year 25. After that comes the tax collector.
Mr. President, if I could just ask a quick question on that. Sure. Is the bond money that we've been paying for the school updates sitting in that account? Is that
That's
some of the
separate.
money?
That's not included here. That's
Okay.
separate.
That's separate than, so our current rates and what we have in our general fund and other is going to maintain that $125,000 that you're budgeting. this year?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So let me just clarify one thing, Mr. Rayner. I want to let Mr. Rayner finish the presentation. Okay. Continue. Thank you, Mr. Rayner.
So I think we just did finance. So tax collector is next. We are projecting slight decreases in municipal lien and penalties and interest fees this year, resulting in a 5.55% decrease for an overall projected tax collector revenue of $260,500. Next is the building official. We are still seeing increased activity in renovations and improvements and the resulting required inspections. We are projecting an overall increase in building official revenue of 2.93% for a total of $737,000. Following building official is planning. Overall, we adjusted revenues to more accurately forecast road cut permits. That's what you see reflected in the miscellaneous revenue line. We therefore project $43,500 for the next fiscal year. Okay, police, the next source of income is from police operations found on page 22. We project slight increases in revenue from fines and permits. We therefore project police revenue to increase by 2.71% to $196,900. Following that is harbor master. We expect slight increases in mooring fees and fines and project revenue at $117,435. Following is fire. This will be the third year of our public safety capital program. We kickstarted the program with American Rescue Plan funds, and will ensure the program remains self-sufficient with a share of ambulance revenue. Ambulance revenues, however, are currently down year over year. Internally, we will be pursuing a more favorable ambulance billing service contract in the coming year. We project fire revenue to decrease by 17.74%, with resulting projected revenue to be $185,000 next fiscal year. That's what obviously we had to project based on the current contract, and we'll be looking to change that contract and make that more favorable in the coming year. Following that is the Prudence Island Transfer Station. Sticker sales remain flat for the Prudence Island Transfer Station, but because this year's sticker is for an 18 months, vice 12 months, we will see increased revenue over the last fiscal year. So we therefore project $33,580 in revenue from the Prudence Island Transfer Station. Next is recreation. Based on signups and projected events and programs, we project revenue to remain relatively flat at $259,080 for fiscal year 25. And then lastly is other. We are projecting increased reservations at the campground, increased revenue from the town's communications tower and the polo grounds. Additionally, the Glen Manor House is no longer an enterprise fund and is now operated under a concessionaire's contract. The contractor is projecting a $263,000 payment to the town next fiscal year, which is a 46% increase over the current fiscal year. They are also paying $30,000 into a Glen Manor House capital fund. Overall, we project a 21.88% increase in other revenue for a total of $559,081. So if you return to page 10. These total revenues add up to $74,346,959, which is equivalent to the expenditures. And we ask you to provisionally approve $74,346,959 in projected revenues. We will begin to cover the rest of the budget, starting with the school department tomorrow night.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Do we have questions, comments, council?
I've got a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
Under fire revenue, are we not inspecting tents anymore? Or is that just dumped into miscellaneous? Do we know?
I believe that's a miscellaneous. That income is so small.
Understood, but it's been zero for a couple of years, and I know there's been a few tents put in town. And then Melville Campground, they put an awful lot of new spaces in down there. We're only looking for $7,000 extra in income with all the extra new spaces.
I can confirm that, but those were the estimates that we got from the proprietor.
Okay. If you could, please. And then
Make a note of that.
already covered interest income. I'll make my statement again, specifically for our two-step representatives that are online, that our motor vehicle phase out does not have an escalator in it. And if I'm not mistaken, neither does the tangible tax reimbursement have an escalator in it. So both of those nice programs from the state actually end up costing taxpayers more money because they don't have escalators to help balance them out. So the end result is more money on the back of the property taxpayers. Real estate transfer fees, I didn't look specifically, I'll go looking myself in a minute, but you're comfortable with $155,000 in the current market?
Yes, it's obviously a moving target, but we way underestimated it for this current fiscal year. And we think we're being conservative in the next fiscal year.
Okay. And payment in lieu of taxes, is that the South Coast contract, the 11,850?
That is, correct me if I'm, yeah, Portsmouth Housing.
Portsmouth, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any further questions from councilors? Mr. Gleason?
Just had one question about the Prudence Island, the sticker sales. That does not go towards the general enterprise fund? That's separate for them?
No,
First
by
remind me how
council
that works.
direction, those sales go into the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything further from councilors? All right. Mr. Grieb?
Tom Grieb, 110 Thayer Drive. The reason I came up earlier is I was hoping to be on the right page when I talk, but can you get page 19 at 19? On page 19 here, the state aid total line, the 2024 and 2025 state aid totals are at the bottom of the fourth and sixth column. If you look at them, you see revenues from state aid has increased about $332,000 this year. If you then go to the total 24-25 change, which is at the bottom of the seventh column, you will see that only about $38,000 change is being reported. There's an accounting error here someplace that needs to be corrected.
Probably a formula error on the bottom. Excel spreadsheets are fun, aren't they?
Bring it up right now, but we'll make sure it's fixed by tomorrow.
Fitzmaurice? Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Fitzmaurice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I was a bit surprised by the change in the mill rates. My comments I've tried to change, so they'll be a little bit off. Mr. Rayner, in his presentation, showed Portsmouth taxes in relative to the rest of the state. I've taken a look at the other side of this thing. The taxpayers, of course, have a different view. The two references I chose to take a look at were the Tax Foundation, which ranked Rhode Island as number 42 in property taxes, and Forbes, which ranked us in property taxes number 39 among the states. 50th would be the worst, of course. So if you look at Massachusetts, they're higher than we are, but their salaries are a great deal higher than we are. So I would like to suggest that we are bumping up against a maximum here in the state. If we compare ourselves to the rest of the state and the state is too high in property taxes, then that's not a relevant comparison. You know, we should be comparing against what we can afford to pay as opposed to what somebody else is being overcharged. And I think that that's the case in the state here. So clearly it's better to be at the bottom third of the towns in terms of the levying of taxes, but not in a state that's ranked as high as we are. So we'd like to present that thought.
Is the national tax people you refer to in their estimation of property tax throughout the country, are they also looking at the ability of the people in the town of Portsmouth to pay?
No,
Okay, so that
there are
was
probably
what,
other
not-
studies
not
that do that.
relevant to our conversation, or was that just something gratuitous?
I think it's very relevant to the people who are paying the taxes.
Out in Colorado,
No,
Oh,
in this
Idaho.
state and in this town.
but you do know that most of the country does not rely on property tax as much as the New England states do. And in fact, that is a well-known fact throughout the country.
I don't think that's.
New England has historically always relied more on property tax for its funding of government than any other part of the country.
Well, I know that Texas depends very strongly on their property taxes. For
They also
instance,
have $1 billion worth of oil coming in every day, but Thank you.
We could, I mean, obviously we could go on and on, but I think from Mr. Rayner's point, I mean, we're in Rhode Island, we're a town in Rhode Island. He compared us to other Rhode Island towns. So I think it's a fair comparison. You know, you mentioned that Massachusetts has lower tax, but higher, you know, higher salaries. Well, higher tax, but higher salaries. You know, we're in Rhode Island. It comment noted, but I think we can only, you know, I think it's a fair comparison to compare us to our neighboring communities.
Yes, and Massachusetts also does a better job of general revenue sharing and
Right.
funding of the schools.
Right. So I
From
mean,
the state level.
I understand the comment, but I think it's fair to, I think the way Mr. Rayner has presented it is
well, and then we're,
fair.
when we're always destined then under your argument, Mr. President, to be following the trends in the state, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. And
Like every
I
other
object to
community.
that
Well,
characterization.
Okay, comment noted.
Government is reserved, right?
I believe in many regards,
Let's-
well,
let's
if you're
just move
quoting
on.
me, then I'll let it fly.
Okay.
The,
Part of my antics.
I'd like to speak to something that's kind of complicated here and hopefully everybody at home can follow. There's a difference, of course, in the mill rate and the levy increase, and I'm going to focus solely on residential property taxes. There's a difference between the mill rate increase, a percentage, which is about, as near as I can figure, a little over 3% increase. I was surprised by the mill rate change, so I haven't checked these numbers yet. So any case, the property tax goes up quite a bit higher, of course. And the difference between the two is that one is the levy against people who already have property is the mill rate. And while the taxes they pay is calculated against the mill rate. The total expenditure on property taxes, though, is much higher because we depend a great deal on new property coming online in construction, new construction in this town. And more than half of that increase, and it was before the changes were made, $2.4 million in the residential property taxes. We're very much dependent upon that function. And yet that's something that the town council and the town administration doesn't control. And we've spoken to this issue in the past. We're banking a lot and betting a lot that we got the numbers right. I noted that the town administrator said that we got it a little bit, the actual was a little bit higher than the projected from last year. We were concerned about it last year as well. We're in a market which is very difficult to predict in terms of housing sales. And that drives, of course, new construction to a large degree. So, and again, we're conscious of the fact that it's very difficult to predict these numbers, but we also point to the council and say, we're betting a lot on this, I repeat. So, that's going to be an issue if the housing business goes south on us. And I don't know how we're going to handle that. We can probably absorb 100,000 or so without too much trouble, but beyond that, we're going to have difficulties. But if you compare on another subject, if you compare where the rates are, where the money's coming from in this levy, this total levy, it's all of the increases coming out of the residential property taxes. The commercial property tax, the new levy with the new mill rate may be a little bit above zero, but it's not much above it. Intangible as frozen is down a bit. So, we're now funding the entire increase in our budget out of the residential property taxes. And I think that's an important factor. And we have, once again, a lot of budget growth this year. Normally we get a break in a re-election year, in an election year, and but we didn't get one this year. So all I can say is this is a lot of money that we're paying out. And I'm mindful that some of the services in the town are well done. I acknowledge that. Mr. Rayner ran down the list. We're concerned always about the paving business because that's just a giant thing. If you get behind on, you get in trouble. But it's important to understand those factors.
A bit more sometime, someplace.
It's okay. Let him
No, I mean,
finish.
It's been about 10 minutes.
It's okay.
Why?
It's okay because I'm running the meeting. It's okay.
Well, I'm near done. So I'd like to speak, I'd like to ask questions about the revenue that was developed from the, maybe revenue that was developed from reimbursement from the state regarding the school bond of 22, which was 19.5 million. Did we see any indication that we're going to get this? Because we couldn't find it in the revenue section. And that revenue would be somewhere around $300,000.
Projects we've already completed in the school bond, meaning the one-way, the bathrooms at Hathaway, bathrooms at Melville, the field house, the roof at Melville. I think I got them all. I think those are
Right.
4 projects completed
That's
that we've
captured
applied for.
in anticipated capital revenue on the school side because those revenues now get turned over to the school.
No,
No,
they don't because
Or,
they're.
or, correct,
That was-
correction. You're absolutely right. It's, obviously
Choosing
it's captured, but I gotta find out where.
It's,
I'll get back to you.
it's usually under, it's a housing aid, correct? Is where we usually put it, and housing aid is only 137,377, so usually that's a solid number from Chris, but we could have him check that tomorrow.
Well, wherever it might be, we would like it reflected in the budget.
Usually it's the state housing aid.
Yeah, so we'll check this, but if you, it's the, go ahead and bring up page 19 again, because we can make that correction over.
Am I not mistaken that this is a reimbursement of bond expenditures?
You get
Correct.
it,
We are getting from the
35%.
state.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so if we
And
did
the state would
$100,000,
apply
we get
them, and
30.
we're lowering bond indebtedness by that amount, we're assuming?
no. No, you spend all the money, but then you get a reimbursement, it's
Right.
about 35%. This number comes from RIDE. It's not all, you're not gonna get it right away, so if you look at the state aid, the top one there, you'll see a line, state housing aid. That number comes from RIDE, and this is what they anticipate reimbursing back to the town next fiscal year. Additionally, while we're here, you can see that the issue that Mr. Grieve brought up, it was because the new line tangible tax reimbursement didn't get pulled over into that second to last column, and we'll make sure that gets pulled over.
Okay, when this bond election took place, it was our understanding that reimbursement would be at 40%, so it's now 35%. Did it get changed somewhere along the line?
I don't recall, there's varying levels of reimbursement. I don't recall exactly what it was, but this is tracked by the building committee.
Well, the school department advertised it would be, they anticipated, they didn't promise.
Then it's
It would be
40%.
40%.
I mean, typically in the past, it's been 35, but I believe you're right. I think for this school bond is an incentive to get people to do improvements to their school properties. I think it was authorized at 40%.
It was
Bond issues don't change and their interest rate doesn't change during the period of time they're issued. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But the reimbursement at the state level could potentially change.
I don't really believe that. I don't think they change the reimbursement after we have bonded with their approval, because that could cause bond counsel a heck of a lot of heartburn.
Could, it could.
Well, I think,
It was advertised by a previous governor where we get 55% back, but that didn't happen.
That was
either.
a different issue entirely.
but I
Different
think,
issue entirely.
I think the reimbursement, and we can follow up with the school department, is that it's generally project specific. So some projects might get 35%, might get 40%, maybe, but it might not be the entire school project. And we can get that for tomorrow, or Mr. Kenworthy? Okay. Come on up.
We can certainly verify and check, but it should absolutely be for the bond project reimbursements 40%, all other projects 35%. But bond should be 40.
But any idea why the reimbursements that we applied for projects that we finished last summer are lagging?
I do not. I wrote it down to
To
double
check
check on
with
our
Chris.
end as well. Yeah. And the
Thank
page
you.
number.
I haven't got my tax refund yet either.
I didn't get one.
All right. So that's something
Okay,
it's something we will look into.
Sure, I understand. But my understanding, and I want to confirm this, is that this revenue will go into the town side in order to pay for future costs in the bonds, correct?
Yeah, the agreement that we have.
Yep.
This bond reimbursement for the bonded projects, that is town revenue. If there are capital projects that the school conducts and executes, and there's a 35% reimbursement, the council has agreed that that 35% reimbursement will go to the school and help fund their future capital needs.
That's fine, and I understand that, but I'm only speaking to the bonds.
Bond. Yep.
And certainly the outline that I just gave you is what Mr. Rayner told us it would be in last year. So pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments?
Mr. President, I would, I don't think it needs to really be a motion, but with the corrections and some clarifications that are due, I think we can hope, I would suggest we hold off on provisionally approving the revenue until we get at least the school housing aid confirmed, and I think we've already Kayla's already confirmed the formula error.
Yeah.
The bottom line dollar amount is correct. It's just the percentage and the delta from the previous year. But I think I would like to get just double check the school housing aid specifically. And find out why we're not in line, because about $6 million roughly for those 4 projects, give or take. So
Maybe they just have to finish.
roughly
processing it.
40% of that is $2.4 million. If I'm not mistaken. So that housing aid number should be a lot bigger, and we should find out why we're not getting that.
Okay.
And if we do, that changes this budget a whole heck of a lot.
Fair enough. Okay. So we'll hold off on the provisional approval. We'll get some
Just do that first
clarification.
thing tomorrow night.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
I think we're good. So then,
Motion to receive correspondence.
Yeah.
Place it on file.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So future meetings, we'll be right back at it tomorrow night at 7 PM to continue with our budget presentation.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Thank you all.
I couldn't have to go down.